really think of myself as an investor, but not just an investor in stocks and companies, but also an investor in people. That's what I do, that's who I am, and then disruptive innovation really is my investment philosophy.
So one day I said to one of my girlfriends, you know what, I'm gonna quit my job. And she looked at me and she said, are you sure you know what you're doing?
This was a polite, euphemistic way of saying to me, you're out of your mind.
Because I was at the top of my game. One of the world's richest men was quoting my research and referring to me as La Whitney. I had companies like Fidelity, which is a large financial institution, who would ask for my financial models, and then when I would upgrade or downgrade a stock, it would typically move several percentage points. My friend also knew that getting to this place had been very, very hard won.
My boss said to me, what are you doing? You are going to regret this. But that led to the investment firm that I co-founded a few years ago.
Now, I wouldn't have described it this way then, but today, what I understand is I was saying it's time for me to disrupt myself.
My life is very much about this whole notion of disruptive innovation, of disrupting yourself over and over and over again.
Disruptive innovation, a term coined by Clayton Christensen to describe a low-end or new market innovation that upends an industry. Disruptors look for needs not being met and then try something new rather than competing against an established curve of learning. We give a lot of airtime to building and buying disruptive organizations, but innovation ultimately begins on the inside.
Companies disrupt companies, upending industries. People can disrupt their careers and their lives. When I left my very comfortable perch as a sell-side analyst, leaving the incumbency, if you will, of Wall Street to become an entrepreneur, that was to get in the game. This is scary to do. I have this job that I get paid to do, and I have stature. And so there was a dare involved. And I think that dreaming does require that we dare.
I feel like I'm on a thrill ride to zero cash flow. It doesn't mean you shouldn't disrupt. It just means if it's scary and lonely, you're probably on the right track.
Here's what I want you to know. There are times in disrupting myself that I am lonely. I'm scared. I feel impoverished. And yet, I wouldn't do it any other way.
It can be pretty unsettling, but it can also be an amazing ride. And what the brain craves, even requires, is the delicious dopamine of the unpredictable. We all like to make plans for the future. But pursuing a disruptive course requires that you cannot see the end from the beginning.
If you want to disrupt yourself, if you'll go to a place where no one else is playing or no one wants to play, your odds of success will improve significantly.
The odds of success are 6 times higher, the revenue opportunity 20 times greater when you pursue a disruptive course. One of the best ways for us to be able to make sense of this non-linear world is the S-curve. So what does the S-curve tell us? Well, it tells us that at the low end, growth is going to be slow. And then once you reach a tipping point, which is typically around 10 to 15% of a market, you speed up, you go into hypergrowth. And then at 90% or saturation, your growth again tapers off. Once you approach mastery, you're not enjoying the feel-good effects of learning, and so boredom can kick in. And if you don't jump or aren't allowed to jump to a new curve at this point, your plateau can become a precipice.
You know, it's sort of like I'm at the top of my game. What do I do next?
Right.
So I think there's that sense of there's something more, there's something else that I need to be doing, and I'm sitting at the top of that S curve.
When it peaks, we do what all great disruptors do. We walk straight into the innovator's dilemma and jump to a new curve, because companies don't disrupt, people do. Let's talk about you, the disruptor. You found unmet functional and emotional needs. How do you take the right kinds of risk? Whatever your discipline. Get the basic skills that you need to do your job and then focus on your distinctive strengths.
What do I do that makes me feel strong in any given day? And at the end of the day, you sit down and you go, you know, I felt really good when I was doing this. Then you start to sort of say, okay, maybe I know what my talents are.
Marcus Buckingham said, our strengths clamor for our attention in the most basic way. Using them makes you feel strong, invigorated, inquisitive, successful.
Embrace your constraints. Constraints are problems to be solved. Constraints drive us to rethink at a very, very basic level how we do things.
There's some sort of magic in those constraints because the constraints force you to mine for the embarrassment of resources already on hand,
right,
which may very well be your greatest strengths.
Great study done by Entrepreneur Magazine in 2007. Here's what they discovered. Of the 500 entrepreneurs, only 28% had access to bank loans or lines of credit, only 18% to equity, only 4% to venture funding. What that means is at least 50%, as much as 72% of those companies bootstrapped. And so I ask you, were these entrepreneurs successful in spite of their constraints or because of their constraints? The most important thing I've learned about failure is that whether we choose to see it, any experience, as a failure or success is ultimately a choice. Whether you innovate or not, you risk downward mobility, which is why our dreams are so important.
If we're not daring and we're not dreaming and we're not doing, then we're stuck.
Dreams may call for a leap of faith, but they set the soul soaring. When we dream, we hunger for a better life. When we dream, we become problem solvers, letting nothing stand in our way. Dreaming is the engine of disruption. Do I dare? Do I dare? Do I dare disturb the universe?